Hello, everyone. Good morning. How are we? We're just going to let people mosey on in on this Wednesday. Hope everyone's been doing okay. Let's see. I still don't see Cyndi, but oh, there she is. Hi, Cyndi. How is everyone? I haven't done kind of a session like this in a minute. In fact, I think the last one we did was with AJ, who was talking to us about events and sponsorship. So hi, Cyndi.
Hi.
How are you?
Good. Hello, everyone.
Good. Well, I know people are just going to be trickling in. So let's do what we always do. If you've been around out in the boons for a minute, you know, nothing makes me more happy than folks figuring out that they're in the same city, they have the same mission, so that you guys can go off and be like fundraising BFFs. So if you could, in the chat, if you are able, please say who you are, where you are, and what your nonprofit is. That would probably be helpful for Cyndi as well, as she leads this training. I'm also going to make sure that Cyndi, you can share your screen if you need to. Today's topic of conversation is one that I admit is not my area of expertise, and that is about specifically writing a winnable case for support in relation to grants. I have done grant writing before. It's generally the thing that I love to give away. And so I'm so grateful to have someone like Cyndi, who's such an expert. She really enjoys this. She works with a range of nonprofits with different missions and budgets. And she's going to talk through how to execute a case for support that gives you the most chances for success possible. I don't know if this statistic is up to date, but I was reading that like less than 10% of first-time applicants with the funder get an award. And I was like, wow, that means it's so competitive. And so I just want everyone to have the knowledge, tools, and information so that when you are making your argument to be funded, you just have the best shot, right? Because you're putting in that work and energy. And I find that grant writing is a bit of an art and a science, and sometimes takes like an insider like Cyndi, an expert like Cyndi, to help teach us the way. So let's just check out the chat. Let's make sure we're recording. We've got Memphis, we've got Yorktown, Charlotte, Woodland. You guys are all over the place today. Oh my goodness. I love that. Amazing. I'm in Southern California. I didn't see any California folks. Oh, no, Woodland, California. That's my bad. Okay, cool. So without further ado, Cyndi, I'm gonna let you take it away, and I will help you monitor as needed. For everyone, we're gonna go for about 45 minutes, and then if you could type your questions in the chat, or we'll have some time for Q&A at the end. Excited to learn from you.
Awesome. Well, thank you all for being here. It's so pleasantly surprising that all of you are here today. I didn't expect such a large group, so I'm really thrilled. I want to preface that I have Evelyn on the call as well, or not the call, on the Zoom as well. Evelyn is my Chief Strategy and Implementation Officer. And she also does some of the grant writing as well. So, and I work with a few other contractors. So let me just tell you a little bit, start by telling you a little bit about me. I'm with Cyndi Mayer Consulting. It's a business that I founded in 2019. And interestingly, I actually got the business off the ground in 2020, mainly because, well, we didn't have anything better to do. Not really. I had planned it. But I had the time because we were all homebound for the most part, not all of us, but a good portion of us. So I've been grant writing for about 20 years. As Jess indicated, I do enjoy it, which is why I wanted to start my own business, because I wanted to help nonprofits who um, were either smaller or mid-sized nonprofits to help them to really accelerate their missions to the next level. I've worked for organizations of all sizes. I've done everything from being the government grant writer to senior grant writer to recruiter. I've done a lot of things, but grant writing is what I like to do. And so that's another reason why I started the business. My educational background, I have a Bachelor of Arts in Mass Communication and a Master of Public Administration from Seton Hall University. Interestingly, my colleague Evelyn, who is also here and who is going to support me with the chats and with Q&A, we actually graduated from Seton Hall together. So we have a long history, not necessarily of working together, but working together in college. So over the past year, CA Mayer Consulting has generated like 16 million for our clients in funding. That ranges from human services to performing arts, couple performing arts, and more human services. And so we have also managed clients who have portfolios of like 200 funders. All right, so we've done this. So one thing I ask of all of you is that you will take some time to follow me on Facebook or follow CA Mayer Consulting on Facebook and LinkedIn, and you'll see the links right there. So we got a little information about where you guys are from and who you are. What I would love to know a little more about is what your role is in your respective organization. Would you mind putting that in the chat for me? Okay, Tamara, I see you. You're the grant writer. ED, okay. Okay, we have some founders. Volunteer and grants manager. I can relate to that, Elsa. I've done that as well. Executive director and everything else. I hear you and I'm with you. Let's see. How do I get out of that? All right. Well, bear with me 1 second. Okay, now we're back. All right, so one of the things, or the primary thing I would love for you all to take away from this masterclass, at the end of the day, I want you to feel empowered to create your own winning case for support, for grant support. And I think you'll be able to do that with the information that I'm going to be sharing with. One of the things I want us all to understand is that our job as we are seeking grant funding is to make a funder feel confident in investing in our missions. Let me repeat that. Our job is to make a funder feel confident in investing in our missions. So some of the things that we're going to discuss, we're going to start with some grant writing myths and facts. Our grant writers on the call here can relate to some of these, I'm sure. We'll talk about what you'll need to know and have before applying, what funders want, and where to find grants. I have a lot of people that come to me that are doing Google searches, and we want to get away from that. And what funders expect post-award. So let's start with a few myths. First myth is that your mission is enough to get you funded. You may have the best mission, you may have the most dire need and constituency to serve, but at the end of the day, that's not enough to get you funded. Another myth is that your grant writer is responsible for developing the program or project that you're proposing. And that's simply not true. Nothing is done in a silo in this world, in this realm, I should say. Another myth is that you provide the grant writer with an RFP and say, here, make this happen. And it's not the way it works. One thing to understand, which is a fact, is that grant writing is a collaborative effort in that you for my grant writers, grant writing. The people, your program directors, your administrators, your program personnel, they're the ones who know about that program. To give you a good example, when I worked for an organization in Paterson, New Jersey, I worked, although I was the government grant writer for the organization, I worked with a team. In other words, I worked with the CFO, I worked with the administrator, and on occasion, some of the program staff, depending on the program. So again, this is not something that's done in silo. It is a collaborative effort throughout your organization. It may be working with other partners. Regardless, it is a team effort. So some facts about grant writing. First and foremost, your mission must align with the grant funders' investing priorities. Very key. For every program or project, you should have established goals, objectives, and anticipated outcomes. You should be concerned with data collection and performance measures because you're going to be required to address these things early on. And you would be surprised. I know this sounds very foundational, but you'd be surprised at how many clients come to us that don't have these things already in place. And then we have to kind of move them a step back and say, hey, you're not ready for this process. There are some things that need to be done prior to you even thinking about putting your hand in the ring for any grant opportunity. Also, your organization best, right? So if your organization, for my executive directors, if you choose to work with a grant writing consultant like myself, it's important that you be a part of that collaborative effort because you know what resources are needed for your organization, your project, your program better than anyone else does. Just as a staff grant writer, your program personnel knows what resources are needed to implement a program and what expectations can come of that. And when again, it's a collaborative process. And let me tell you what happens if you don't look at it as a collaborative process, in my experience. As a grant writer, I can make the most educated guesses, but at the end of the day, if I'm not a part of the project personnel, I don't know what the outcomes can be. I can make an educated guess, whereas you can tell me or the person in the program or on the program staff can tell me, this is what's reasonable. This is what's feasible. I can't tell you how many organizations I've talked to where they've written a grant or worked with a grant writing consultant who wrote a grant about all this amazing work that's going to be done. For example, they're going to have 85 a cohort of 85 students to graduate their financial literacy program. But they were hard pressed to get 20 students enrolled into the program. So again, it's a collaborative process. As grant writer, you never want to guess at that. You want to engage the right people, ask questions so that what you present is realistic to any funder. But before we move forward, I would like to know from you guys in the chat, and I wish I could see the chat move gracefully through this, but it's not letting me. How many of you have applied for grants and been awarded grants? You could just raise your hand. That might be easiest. Anybody? Okay. All right. Well, here's the thing. You are altruistic, you're empathetic, and that's what drives you every day, right? It drives you to do what you do. It drives you to support your mission, whether you founded it or not. It drives you to do what you do every day in support of that mission. But funders, on the other hand, are driven by quantified, defendable data that can demonstrate a good investment of their resource of their funds. And a competitive application you should think of as a bridge between that altruistic generosity of nonprofits that we all have, not me as a nonprofit, but having worked with one, I'll speak in their language, with the mechanics and data of measuring social impact. Because at the core, that's what funders want to do. They want to support your social impact. So, a few things you should know going in is the first and foremost thing is to know thy funder. You need to understand that funder in and out, what their mission is, what their vision is, who they funded in the past. Very helpful information. If I look at a funder's past giving history and they funded animal welfare, primarily in secondary education programs, then my performing arts client is probably not the best fit. So do your research on the funder, know them, because you need to think about this as a potential partnership as opposed to a potential gift to my organization. Where they've invested, their geographic region. If I see a funder that's primarily investing in West Virginia or primarily in the Midwest, some of my clients might not be a good fit, considering that most of them are here in New Jersey or New York. New Jersey or New York, yes. You want to also know how they invest. How do they make their investments? Do they invest in general operating expenses? Do they invest in infrastructure, capital improvements, endowments? How do they invest? What are their what are their investment strategies? You also want to know about their leadership and compensation and their assets. And you can find all of this, or excuse me, most of this information out via their 990, which you all know because your organization is required to file one. Well, so are your funders, right? GuideStar is my go-to for 990s, but they are public accessible. So there are other ways you can get it, but that's my go-to. And in the 990, there is a section called grants and contributions that will actually list who they've made their or who they've awarded grants to. Now, sometimes this information is in that section. Sometimes they'll do it as an attachment, and sometimes the attachment isn't visible. For anybody new to grant writing, you'll learn that some funders just don't want you to to have all the information you need, right? Their funding, their resources are limited, just like yours and mine. And so they don't make it easy all the time. So for those who, and I'm going to break in and out of the chat, so forgive me if my screen goes a little awry. But I do want to be able to have this be interactive, if you will. So I'd like to know for those of you who have been awarded grants or applied to and or awarded grants, what are some of the areas in the application process that stump you, that kind of creates a roadblock for you in applying, if anything? One of my biggest challenges is always sustainability. Somebody thinks like me. Tamara, that's my resident grant writer, right? Yep, that is a big one. How about anybody else? Is anybody else noticing that there are more and more questions about diversity, equity, and inclusion? Yeah. Yes, Kyle. Me too.
Data gathering.
Data gathering. Yes, it's another one. Yes, Leslie, that's not uncommon to not be awarded the first time and then be awarded the second time. You may have gotten some feedback from the funder that helped you prepare a better proposal the next time. Or you may not have, may be on their radar for the next cycle. Tamara, yeah, absolutely. Unsolicited requests not accepted. That's always a big challenge. Yes. Sustainability. Race, gender of board, staff, and constituents. Thank you, Tamara. That is a big one. And it is something that's being asked more of more and more organizations to define or to disclose that information and define how they're addressing it. Yeah. Yes, to Tamara. Managing the grant, especially federal. Oh yeah, federal grants can be something. Awesome. Okay. I think I understand the chat feature now. I think. Wait. All right. All right. So we talked about knowing thy funder. Very important. One of the things I said early on was that one of the things that I would like for you all is to be empowered to create your own individual case for support, case for grant support. And trust me, by doing so, you will be that much further or closer to getting funded to whomever you apply to. Now, moving forward, I'm going to be talking about the basic elements of a grant proposal so that you can build that case for support. And I am using the New York, New Jersey Common Grant Application. Are you guys familiar with that? With common grant applications? I'm using New York, New Jersey, but there are others out there and plenty of them. All you have to do is a Google search. But the New York, New Jersey is a very comprehensive one, and it's within my regional area. So I generally use that. And that's the information that I'm basing the next few slides on. So now we're going to talk about, if I can get my slides to move, funder requirements. There are certain elements that each funder is going to ask you for, and these are all common. They're going to want to know your organizational history and background, your programs, your accomplishments, organizational relationships, very important to funders. Now, how many of you all are keeping a running list of your organizational accomplishments? And when I say a running list, for example, one nonprofit that I worked for, and I always recommend this to all of my clients, is keeping a running list. Founded in 1981 as a simple soup kitchen, feeding hot dogs and beans to the hungry and the homeless in Patterson. 1990 or 82, opened the first men's emergency overnight shelter. 1990, opened the first family shelter. Does anybody do that? Okay, I'm gonna wait a little longer because I'm hoping that someone is going to say yes. Yes, thank you, Kyle. All right, Christy, yes, awesome. For those who do not, sort of, a little more, yes, I would encourage you to start doing that now. Put that together now. Let's see here. Sort of, could be more. Okay. Organizational relationships. I was speaking with one of my clients this morning, who shared with me that they are talking with another organization about doing a joint fundraiser. Now, I was taken aback because so many of my other clients, I say something about creating organizational relationships, and they are like, oh, no, no, we don't do that. And I'm here to tell you that you need to, because that is favorable among grant reviewers. If you ever applied for a federal grant, which some of you have, based on what you put in the chat, you know how important organizational relationships are, and particularly to the grant reviewers. So I encourage you all to form those relationships, because funders want to know, if you can't help a constituent, where do you send them, right? They also want to know where your constituency comes from, who refers them to you. That's important information to know, because if you're saying you're going to be able to get 85 graduates, well, where are those 85 graduates going to come from? What makes them want to enroll in your financial literacy program? Excuse me, I'm going a little ahead. Needed resources. Again, you as making a request for grant funding, you're asking a funder to invest in you. You're asking a funder to invest in your mission. At the very core, you have to make them feel confident in doing so, right? So you need to have a good understanding of what resources are needed to carry out any project or program, right? As mentioned earlier, that example I gave you, that if the grant writer guesses, when it comes time to implement, you could have a problem, right? Try to avoid that as best as possible. Funders want to know about your beneficiaries. You know, grant writing also is a lot of storytelling in some cases. Other cases, it's very rigid, in that you're answering a series of questions, but I always try to weave some stories into there. So funders want to know about your beneficiaries, who they are, where they came from, what's their socioeconomic status, what's their race, gender, age, military, or excuse me, veteran status. Now, again, this seems very foundational and fundamental, but you would be surprised at how many organizations don't feel the need to track certain information. And then they consult with a grant writer, or excuse me, a grant writing consultant, and we're saying, hey, we need to know this, because guess what? These funders are asking us. So if you're not tracking that, I would urge you to figure out a way to do so. You also have to be clear about the problem and the solution that you are presenting. Organizational capacity is important as well. Just because you have this great mission, and you've been doing great work for the last 10 years, does not necessarily mean you have the organizational capacity to carry out a new proposed program or project, right? It also refers to your leadership. Do they have the qualifications to oversee this project? So organizational capacity is extremely important, as is your budget. It needs to make sense, and indicate any other leveraged resources. Has anybody been asked about leveraged resources in a grant application? Here. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, awesome. Keep in mind that grant funders are expecting nothing more than full transparency. Those of you who have applied for government grants, particularly federal grants, know that. There is a whole Transparency Act, I forget the name of it, but there is one in place that requires the federal government to get that information. And it also helps them to determine whether or not you have adequate resources to carry out whatever you're proposing. And then alignment. I can't stress enough how important it is that your mission be aligned with the prospective funder's mission and philanthropic priorities. Also, and I did mention earlier about goals and objectives. You need to have your goals and objectives established for any and all of your programs. They need to be SMART goals and objectives. They need to be specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and timely. And I happen to have a contractor that I work with that is a retired federal grant reviewer. And let me tell you, that is exactly what they're looking for. Are your goals and objectives SMART? Are you planning to properly evaluate the program? This is important because evaluating your programs can tell you whether or not you're meeting your milestones, meeting your goals and objectives. And if you're not, then how do you pivot? If we haven't learned anything else over the last 2.5, almost 3 years, it's that we can pivot in cases of adversity, right? So at times, despite our best intentions, sometimes things don't go quite as we anticipated, and we have to pivot. So evaluations help us to do that or determine whether or not we want to continue a program. And then again, diversity, inclusion, and equity. We are starting to see more and more funders ask these questions about your board demographics, about your staff demographics. What are they? And if they are not reflective of the constituents that you serve, they're going to ask you, what are you doing to address that? And let me tell you, it is beyond time that we do this, because all studies suggest that most board of directors, for example, are primarily white males. And that's fine. But if you are making decisions for a population that's primarily Hispanic and poor, then you may have some disconnect there, right? Anyway, my mother once said to me, Cyndi, isn't it funny? We have all these nonprofits, they're doing great work, but it seems like nothing ever gets accomplished. I don't agree with that necessarily. I think a lot is getting accomplished. I think she was a little misinformed there. What I do think is that there is that disconnect in oversight of something that you really have no experience with. For example, I worked for an organization that provides addiction treatment services, and about 10% of the board of directors are in recovery themselves. About 80% of the staff are also in recovery themselves, and that's meaningful, that's impactful, and that really demonstrates how the leadership is in tune with what the needs are of the populations that they're serving, or in some cases overseeing. So diversity, inclusion, and equity, I think someone put in the chat that was a challenge of a question, and I get it. I understand it, because one of my clients, it's a challenge too. And I try, thankfully, they are very progressive in that they have a way that they're trying to address it, and they have actually implemented it. They have a diversity and inclusion statement, and they are building, or excuse me, adding to their board uh, uh, more diversity as best they can in their very rural area. Okay, so I mentioned earlier, I have actually been coaching a grant writer who has been doing Google search just to find grants. And that's a no-no. It's like looking for a needle in a haystack. And I don't know about you, but um, my time would be better served elsewhere. So I want to share with you a couple of sources that I use. Now, this is not all inclusive because I have subscriptions to a variety of databases that provides grants and grant opportunities and information. But these are my favorite, and that is Candid, which used to be the Foundation Center, which is now Candid and encompasses GuideStar, the Foundation Center, Foundation Directory Online, etc. I have a subscription to that, which is a little expensive, but worth it to me because I see this as the mother of all databases. In fact, I think that the rest of the databases get their information from Candid. So that is a very good investment for anyone who's looking to really build their grant portfolio, who's ready and looking to build their grant portfolio. I have to preface readiness. And it gives you a variety of information. So when I talked earlier, I think I mentioned that I'll look at a funder, see what they funded, what categories they funded in the past. And Candid gives a really good breakdown of that as percentages. So it's actually a bar graph that shows you, their top 4 or top 6, I think, categories. Is it arts and culture? Is it education? Is it higher education? Is it animal welfare? It shows that, it gives a really good graph of that. So that in and of itself, I can look at that in 5 seconds and determine whether or not I should move forward. I should review that funder any forward or any further. Grants.gov is also a great source, not just for finding government grants, because that is the federal grant database, the US federal grant database, but it also has opportunities to learn. They have videos and webinars and information on grants.gov that are have been very, very helpful to me. And I encourage any of you who are looking to apply for federal grants now or in the future, definitely start there. Get to know that like you get to know thy funder, right? And then my other favorite source is Grant Gopher. Now, I'm here to tell you Grant Gopher is nothing that I would necessarily recommend to anyone because it's a cheesy looking little site, but I love the way they break down the information, and they even give you in one quick format the funder, the address, the deadlines, their priorities, whether it's national or their geographic focus. They even go so far as to give you the name of the contact and sometimes an address, phone number, and email if they have it or if it has been provided to them. It's updated regularly, so I can see at the bottom of the form when it was last updated, to know that they got that information from the right source. And anyway, it's really been helpful to me. But I also, again, have a subscription to Grant Station, Grant Watch, and I think one other that I can't think of at the moment. And they're all helpful in their own way, but these are my 3 go-tos that I want to share with you. But listen, we talked all about the pre-award side. but the party isn't over after you receive your grant award and your check, right? There's the implementation process you have to go through. Again, I hope that the tips I shared earlier about collaborating internally and externally, that you do that prior to, so that when it does come time for implementation, there are no hiccups. Auditing. A lot of organizations don't do their own internal audits, and I don't understand why. Because conducting your own internal audits, you can determine what's working and what isn't. And then if something's not working, you can determine how to pivot by doing that audit. Some people do annual audits that I highly recommend for not just your organization, but each and every one of your programs. But you also should be aware that some funders will want to do their own audit of you or of your program. So you need to be prepared for that and have your ducks in a row accordingly. There's also reporting that you have to do. Sometimes you're required to report annually. Sometimes it's quarterly, sometimes monthly. If it's the federal government, it could be monthly. In fact, a good portion, or excuse me, if it's federal contract or even a state contract, more so the state contract, you'd be required sometimes to, depending on what the award is for, you might be required to report monthly. And that's because the state has to report to the federal government on the impact they're making. And then there are some private funders who also need that information to properly share their own individual impact, the impact that their funds are making. So reporting is important. And also, I always advise my clients, even if you don't do one already, do an annual report at the end of the year to send to all of your funders, highlighting your accomplishments over the last year, and what you envision for the future. And you might even be able to make another plea for support. The important thing is that you keep your funders in the loop, because again, this is a partnership. They're investing in you, right? They're investing in your mission. That makes you partners in this. And therefore, they need to know what's going on, what you're doing, how you're effectively addressing the need that you've identified and they have supported for you and invested in you, so that you can do what you do. So it is very important that you do that if you're not already doing so. And then closeout is expected, particularly for a government grant or contract. It's usually a structured process where they would give you instructions on how to do that. Other times it may not be, but you need to be prepared to share with the funder exactly where the funds that they invested in you, where they were allocated. And I'm talking down to the very dollar. And if you're not able to do that right off the bat, let me tell you something, that means you are not fully ready to apply for grant funding. So, first things first, be prepared to give any funder what they want and what they ask for. Simple, right? Follow the instructions. But they also need to know and understand the ins and outs of your organization, the great things that you do, the great things that you have done, the great things that you expect to do, how you expect to do it. They want to know everything about your organization, down to when and why you were founded to present day, because again, your job is to make them confident in investing in your mission, right? And think of it like this. Would you invest in your mission? And if you would, you have to be able to make others confident in doing so as well. And so that's our job, is to make funders confident. So just so you'll know, we have CA Mayer Consulting has worked with a variety of different nonprofits, some small, some large, some young, some seasoned. And one of the things that we have found is that a lot of organizations think they're ready to apply for grants, but they're really not. And one key indicator of your readiness is whether or not you can address effectively all of those bullet points I just went over with respect to the funder requirements. Now, I want to help you get there. So what I want you to do, as mentioned earlier, is I want you to create your own individual organizational case for support. And the easiest way to do that is to follow either those bullet points or a common grant application, and have that all structured and available to either your grant writer or your grant consultant or your staff member who you have placed responsibility of grant acquisitions. They have that information right there, and a quarter of their work is already done, right? By doing so, you will have or be that much closer to having a winnable case for support of your mission every single time, if you have those elements together. So, and I digressed a little bit there. We at CA Mayer Consulting have put together a grant readiness package. And other consultants have them as well. Ours, however, is specifically, I shouldn't say specifically, but it was developed with different sized organizations in mind, even for new, young nonprofit organizations. That, in fact, we are working with two, I believe now, in preparing for them to become grant ready. So we're putting all the building blocks in place so that when they do have all of this, including this case for support, they'll be able to deploy grant applications either internally or externally using a grant consultant. And let me tell you, that case for support, if you want to work with me, makes my job a lot easier. And that's the bottom line. But I hope, if nothing else, you all feel a little more comfortable in creating this case for support. But if nothing else, I encourage you to do it for reporting purposes to your constituents. So you can tell them, share with them what you've achieved over the last year and every year. So with that, I'm going to invite my colleague, Evelyn, and we will take any questions that you guys may have. And I'm happy to answer anything.
So either raise your hand or put it in the chat.
Yes, or put it in the chat.
Don't be shy. We're amongst friends.
Yes.
Yes, yes, yes. Jenna.
Hi,
Okay.
I was wondering, so the organization that I work for, we are an intermediary grantor, and we practice trust-based philanthropy. And so because of that, we provide unrestricted grants to our partner organizations on the ground in India. And we do, we don't have as stringent reporting requirements as a lot of the funders that we seek to work with do. And it makes it really difficult to, especially because all of our partners are grassroots organizations and they have very different solutions, hyper-localized solutions. So my question is, for a funder that wants a budget narrative, and a large portion of what we would request would be granted or unrestricted. So it's very hard to come back and say exactly what you said. if we can't give them an exact like dollar for dollar, where is this going, then we're not ready to apply for a grant. Would you say that the grantors that are asked, or the funders that are asking, we just are not the right fit to apply for those types of grants? Or is it worth trying to explain our model and the data that we do have to back up why our model works for us the way it does? I'm really just understanding, I mean, grants take so much time. If I'm going to be completely wasting my time looking for money for people who really do want to know where every single dollar is spent, or if having a conversation and seeing if, you know, on a one-off case, they'd be open to a different model of work might be useful.
So in that case, Jenna, I would recommend that you connect with the funder and ask them first. Because 9 times out of 10, they'll tell you whether or not they can do it. The other thing I would do if I were in your shoes is concentrate on those funders that who have general operating as their funding priorities, or giving strategy, general operating support. For example, I have a client that's a performing arts theater, which is a challenge, right? Because they get revenue from ticket sales. So sometimes it's kind of hard to answer those questions relative to the application process. So I try to stick with those that are that give a lot more in general operating expenses. I hope that's helpful.
Jenna, I have a question. In terms of the data you're collecting, the hyper-localized areas, are they all collecting data?
So they are, but the way it works is that we use outcomes harvesting as our monitoring, evaluation, and learning, rather than holding them to specific outcomes that they determine ahead of time. And our reporting, then we don't, because we do such stringent and rigorous, because we do such rigorous vetting ahead of time, and we practice trust-based philanthropy, so we trust that they know best, and that we're really, I guess, there to support their work and help them become established. They do have data, but it's not all uniform. And because we don't have funders supporting specific sites, it becomes difficult to pull one set of outcomes out from like another partner's set of outcomes and report on that separately. But yes, we do get data from them, but it's more that we practice outcomes harvesting. So it's a little bit different.
Is it possible to expand the data collection beyond that in terms of the outcomes and the outputs? I guess would the stakeholders be open to that?
I think that because we're a funder that comes from the US, they'd be open to a lot of things to get like continued support. And we try and be really conscious of the power dynamics between us and them and their resources as small grassroots organizations in rural parts of India. And if there's work that we don't have to put on them, then that we can do ourselves with the information that they do give us, we try and practice it that way. So we could require more, but I think that we try really hard not.
Right, just to expand on that, and then we'll move on. This is something that Cyndi and I have been talking about, because I think if it's a different country, it's a different culture, and the whole data collection, we could do a whole presentation on that just right now. We could, but I think part of it is like the difference between outcome and output. So when we're talking about output, we're talking about the numbers, right? The beans, counting the beans in there. And when we're talking about outcomes, we're talking about a behavior that's being changed, or an attitude and that sort of thing. And maybe in terms of motivating the stakeholders to be motivated to capture other data, that human element, that change in going through the program.
Yeah, and we do have stories of that we capture for sure. But it's just less project based. It's it's less outputs based and more outcomes. Yeah, it is definitely.
Guys, we have to come to a hard stop shortly. So I wanted to tell you a couple things. First, I put my contact information in the chat as well. Jessica will also share the slides with you, so you'll have that. And there's a link or two in there that might be helpful to you. There's a few questions that we didn't get to. Paula, I want to definitely address your questions. So will you shoot me an email with them? And I will definitely make sure to respond to them. And Evelyn, if we might have maybe 1 minute, can you address Elsa's comment here? Any tips on making a case to my team for collecting tracking data for beneficiaries? All the corporate grants are asking, and putting in a doesn't seem like it's going to work much longer. I would have to agree with that.
It is kind of what I was saying to Jenna. The key is motivation, because if the group isn't motivated to collect data, they're going to feel like they're being forced to top down. Whereas if you have a group that's more motivated, it's like, hey, we could track how we're doing internally, and this program isn't working, so we should adjust to where the group is saying we should be doing B, because that's what our clients are saying we should do, instead of continuing to do A and hitting a roadblock. I mean, the benefits of data collection, they're twofold internally right off the bat, because you need to know if you're actually making a social impact. And if the clients are saying on the surveys, you're not, you got to adjust. Otherwise, you're not
doing
even
something wrong.
Yeah, you're not even coming close to fulfilling your mission. And then there's the external aspect in terms of evaluations for the funders, because they want to see, why should we invest in your mission? Because there's probably several hundreds of other nonprofits, God bless you, but hundreds of other nonprofits that are doing something similar. And you got to make a good case for that. That's where the evaluations come in. But a lot of it is motivation.
Yeah, and I think we could probably do a master class on that, Evelyn, seriously. But I think the thing is to impress upon your team that, because I guarantee your team is there not because they are getting big bucks. They're there because they support your mission and they want to help the constituents that you serve. So I would impress upon them that by doing this, by capturing this data, by tracking this data, we will be able to better serve our constituency. It's really that simple. And like Evelyn said, if something is not working, right? And I guarantee you, your team will say, this isn't working, or this isn't working, or we could do this because this is what they really need. So they have their own opinions and ideas. And I think if you approach it that way, you might get better buy-in.
Okay, and with that, we're going to wrap it up. Thank you so much, Cyndi and Evelyn, for coming and sharing everything you know, your wisdom on all things Winnable, case for supports, grant writing. For anyone who wants to continue the conversation, please be in touch with their team. The email is right there. I know that both of these wonderful experts are open and willing and wanting to have these conversations with you. So please take them upon it. And I will put into the Raise More Together Facebook group a link to the recording and the slides, so you all will have that. And if you can, I put the link to a survey. I know that they both would love your feedback, so please fill that out when you have a few quick minutes. Thank you again.
Just could I add one more thing?
Yeah.
We do offer a free consultation if you're considering an RFP and you're on the fence about it and you're not sure whether to pursue it or not. One of the attendees said, it's very time consuming. And so we do offer a free consultation to figure that out. So please feel free to reach out to us.
Yes, absolutely.
All right, everyone. Have a great rest of your Wednesday. Thank you.
You too. Thank you all.